Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats, podcast episode number 209. I'm your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't do it, nobody can. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels around the world. Thanks for joining me today, folks. Great to have you on board. This is a special annual podcast I do about the highlights of the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival, which I just attended. In fact, I am attempting to get home now. This year I brought our truck and camper. We have bought a big camper to go in our truck last year. Brought that to the festival, parked in the back 40 parking lot. Had a reservation to leave Port Townsend today, Sunday, September 9th at 5:15 on the Port Townsend ferry. And at 12:56 p.m. today, I got a text message from the Washington State Ferry saying all ferry service is temporarily interrupted and the boats aren't going. So you're going to have to go to a different ferry or do something else. So I drove south to get in line in the Kingston Edmonds ferry, and it's a 3-hour wait. So I'm sitting in my truck about 2.1 miles from the ferry terminal in a line, and eventually I'll get on the boat and get home. So I thought this would be a good time to do my highlight reel from the festival. Let's start with I got to the festival Thursday morning, September 6th. I came earlier than normal because I wanted to get a good parking spot for my truck and camper. And as a presenter at the festival, you get a parking pass to what they call the back 40 parking lot, which is adjacent to the facility where the festival is, to Point Hudson, which is really nice because if you have to park in town, it can get expensive, or you have to walk like a mile. So anyway, got there Thursday morning with the truck and camper, got the spot that I wanted, which was really awesome. And started doing my podcasting right away. And so I thought, first of all, I would say I did 13 podcasts while I was there, 13 recordings, which I think is the most I've ever done at one festival. I think maybe I've done 10 or 11 before. So I did 13, and counting this recording today, it'll be 14 that I did this weekend. So it was really fun. It's fun and it's exhausting at the same time. But anyway, I thought I would highlight the people that I talked to here real quickly just to give you an overview of what's coming up in future podcast episodes. First interview I did was with Doug Brooks. Doug is a Japanese boat building expert. Since the early 1990s, he got interested in Japanese boat building and has actually gone to Japan and done 7 internships with Japanese boat building masters that were in their 70s or 80s. So he's an expert at it. He builds the boats, he teaches Japanese boat building, and he's also trying to help them preserve their art. Very fascinating interview, and Doug lives in Vermont. So that was my first one. Second interview was with Bruce Tipton, and Bruce has been in Port Townsend for 40 years. He came there in 1978 as kind of an artist guy and started building wooden boats, and then the wooden boat economy changed in Port Townsend and sales slowed way down, so then he decided to specialize in building wooden spars, which he has become an expert at over the last, I'm thinking 30 years or more. Well, he's been building spars, but he started really specializing in them maybe 30 years ago, something like that. I've attended Bruce's classes over the last few years at the festival on how to build a mast, because I was building the mast for my scamp, and Bruce gave me the idea to build a hollow mast that wasn't bird's mouth, that would be simpler, which I did. So it was really fun to sit down with Bruce and hear his story of how he got to Port Townsend and how he got into doing wooden masts and that sort of thing. Third interview was with Bruce Blatchley, who heads up the contemporary boat building program at the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building in Port Hadlock, which is right next to Port Townsend. And I've interviewed Bruce probably 3 times before. It's been a couple of years since I've talked to him. We always have a good time. Bruce is a fellow road bike rider. I love to ride road bikes. I'm not anywhere near the category or level of speed that Bruce is, but we sat down and had a good chat about what's happening at the boat school and with the contemporary program and some of the fun projects he's working on. So that was fun as usual. Interview number 4 with Nadja Chimenti. And Nadja is she has her master's captain's. She has her captain's 100-ton license. She's Wayne Chimenti's daughter. And I sat down with her on board the Felicity Ann, which is a double-ended sailboat that was restored over the last few years in Port Townsend. It's a very famous boat that the person that owned the boat, Ann Davidson, in the 1950s, early 1950s, was the first woman to sail solo across the Atlantic, and she did it in this boat. And over the years, it came to the U.S. and went into disrepair pretty significantly. So they've completely restored the boat, and they're using it for training. And Nadja is in charge of that program. We sat down and talked about it and had a really great time. So that was pretty fun. Next interview, Marty Loken. I think he has a record for most interviews with me on the podcast. He's a local guy, lives on Marrowstone Island. Marty is one of those guys that can do just about anything. A very modest guy, though. You'd never know that he was an expert at so many things: photography, writing, boat building, boat restoration. Just amazing guy. And Marty actually received the Lifetime Achievement Award this year at the Festival for Community Service and Spirit, which he so deserves that because he organizes a Pocket Yacht Palooza every year and the Palooza Cruiser. It's the biggest gathering of small boats on the West Coast. And so I sat down and chatted with Marty. He's always got boat projects going on. He takes derelict boats and makes them like new and builds boats, and we always have a great time. So that was really fun as usual. Next, I sat down with Jenny Wilson and Nathan Nelson, who are both boat school students at the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building. And we talked about their upcoming trip to Tasmania, to Hobart, which is where the biannual Australian Wood and Boat Festival is, and they're taking a boat over there and building a boat while they're there, and they're going to be there for 2 months, 4 of them or more. And so we talked about that whole thing, and it was really fun. And Nathan even mentioned that he started listening to the podcast last year, driving between Portland and Port Townsend, and has really enjoyed it. And even mentioned the podcast I did with my mom, which is pretty fun. So that was number 6. Number 7 was with David King, who's been in Port Townsend since the 70s also. He's currently the treasurer of the Northwest Maritime Center, has been into wooden boats and maritime trade for many years. And he was even the mayor of Port Townsend for a while. So we sat down and chatted, which was really fun. Then I did an interview with Jake Beatty, who's the executive director of the Northwest Maritime Center. This is probably the third or fourth interview I've done with Jake. We talked about this year's race to Alaska, the 70-48 race, talked about the festival, talked about the Maritime Center's acquisition of 48 North magazine, talked about the marine thrift stores that they started, Had a great time. It was good to get an update and hear about upcoming races also that are going to happen next year for Race to Alaska and 7048. Next, it was on to Sean Kuhlman. He's the chief instructor of the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building. And we talked about some of the projects they've been working on. We talked about the new marine systems program the school is launching. Campus capital projects. They basically replaced, refurbished the piers under the school. They've replaced the breakwater wall. They're going to get a new roof, new windows. They're doing all this stuff. Betsy Davis has been successful in getting grants to do a lot of things, so it's pretty cool. So that was really fun. Next on with John Harris from Chesapeake Lightcraft, or CLC Boats. And they're a kit boat manufacturer on the East Coast, Annapolis, Maryland. John and I sit down every year and do an interview while he's at the festival. They bring, 20 or 30 of their boats, which is incredible. We had a really great time talking about stuff. There's some of their new designs and some things that are working well, and so that was really cool. And let's see, so that was number 10. Number 11 was with Larry Froley. Larry is a guy that grew up surfing in Southern California. Then he's done paddleboarding, which traditionally is prone paddleboarding, where you're laying on your stomach. Then he got into stand-up paddleboarding. He has his own company that he sells paddles for these boats. He races boats. He's 67 years old. He's obviously very athletic and in excellent condition, very enthusiastic about the sport. And he teamed up with CLC Boats quite a few years ago now to help them with some new designs. And he's kind of like a West Coast rep for them. He lives in Sacramento, California. So I hooked up with Larry and we did an interview, which was really a blast. He's a very enthusiastic guy. Next, it was Inger and Sean Rankins. I interviewed them 3 or 4 years ago, mainly about their boat Keto, which is a Spitzgatter. But this year, Inger entered the 7048 race, which is a race from... Hang on just a second, I got to move the truck. Okay, I'm back. So the 7048 race is a race from Tacoma to Port Townsend. It's 70 miles. They give you 48 hours to complete it. It's human power only, so paddle, row, and also cycling, or and I'm spacing out here on what you call it when you pedal your boat, pedal drive basically. It's like a bicycle, but it's got a pedal or a propeller underwater. So anyway, Inger entered this race in a Port Townsend or a PT-11 dinghy, rowing by herself, and she completed the race in just under 20 hours, rowed completely through the night. The race starts at 5:30 p.m., and she did phenomenal. It was amazing. A lot of the other boats stopped. She placed, I think, 40th out of 120 boats or something like that. So it was pretty cool. So I got to sit down with her and talk about that whole thing and how she grew up in Norway, rowing boats as a kid, just as transportation to her grandparents, to an island that her family owned for the summer. They would spend time there and stuff. So that was really fun. And then the last interview I did was with Eben and Annie, who are a couple from New Zealand. They own the boat Taliesin, which they purchased from Lynn and Larry Party about 3 years ago. And I've done 2 or 3, I think 2 other interviews with them. So we got to catch up with what they're up to and what's going on with Taliesin, and it was really fun. They're really fun folks to chat with. So there you have it, 13 interviews, probably total recording of 6.5 hours, so that was pretty sweet. So other highlights for me, I already mentioned the Lifetime Achievement Awards, Marty Loken, but that was really fun to see Marty get that because he does so much for the boating community and wooden boats and small boats. It's pretty neat. Every year at the festival, Lee Valley is there, and they're a vendor for really high-quality hand tools. Their own brand is called Veritas. And usually I don't even really look at the tools because I know they're really high quality, but they're expensive, and it's like, oh, my budget, I can't really do anything with this. But this year I thought I'd talk to him about their low-angle block plane because I've been using a Stanley, and it works okay. But I use it a lot, and I always think, gee, if there was, how much would it be worth to have a better tool to use for that? Because it's just a all-purpose tool to take material off of plywood and hardwood and softwood and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I stopped by there and talked to the sales guy, Dave. Shout out to Dave if he's listening. And I said, Dave, I've got a Stanley low-angle block plane. I've had it for probably 20 or 25 years. You know, I thought about getting a different plane. What do you think? You know, what have you got? And Dave said, well, you know what? That's a good plane. He said what you could do to save quite a bit of money over buying our plane for $150 or $170 is you could put a better blade in your existing plane. He says, in fact, we make a blade for that exact plane that costs $40, and he said it just takes a little more time to sharpen than the blade you have, but the what's the word for it's basically the amount of time you can use the plane before you have to sharpen it again is 10 or 9 or 10 times as good as the blade you have. So if your blade will last 2 hours between sharpenings, 2 hours of use, or let's say it's 1 hour, with this blade, once you get it sharp, it'll go for 9 hours before you have to sharpen it again. So I'm not a huge sharpening guy. I mean, I like to use sharp tools, but it is work to sharpen. So the long and short of it is he showed me in the catalog which blade to get. Now I've got to go home and measure my plane to see what the width and the breadth of the throat on my plane is, and then I can order a blade from them for $40. So I did that yesterday, and then I've always seen the honing guides there. Now I have a honing guide that I use to sharpen my chisels and my plane with, but it's not that easy to use. I don't always get the results I want. It doesn't always hold the blade square. It's just not super precise. So I noticed Lee Valley had some honing guides, so I looked at those today, and I ended up buying one of their honing guides for $60. It will sharpen chisels or blades down to a half an inch in width. You have to buy a separate tool if you want to sharpen your chisels that are narrower than that. Anyway, I got to try it out. It's very precise, very easy to use. Once it cuts the primary bevel at 25 degrees, rather than having to move your blade down in the guide, all you do is you turn a little lever which moves this cam for the roller, which sets it at a sharper angle for your a less sharp angle, I guess you would say. I think you would say that. Anyway, it gives you the honing angle that you need. So you've got a primary bevel and a honing bevel, so it gives you the honing bevel. Anyway, I bought that. I paid for it at the show because I saved sales tax and shipping, and they'll send it to me, and I'll get it in about 7 days. So I'm pretty excited about that. I haven't bought a new hand tool for a while. The other thing about going to the festival is I get to reconnect with friends that I only see once a year, maybe twice a year, people that I've gotten to know over the last, especially since 2012, when I started coming to the festival and spending several days and doing presentations and getting involved in the scamp and all that. So it's fun to reconnect with those people. Also, my buddy Brian Hansen, that lives about 6 blocks from me in Stanwood, maybe 10 blocks, I don't know. We don't see each other much in Stanwood, but he came to the festival for the day Saturday, and we got to hang out, have lunch and dinner together, and look at boats and chat and catch up, so that was really cool. It was pretty amazing staying in our camper this year on my truck, our truck, versus in prior years. I had the 1994 Chevy Silverado with a canopy, and I would sleep under the canopy, which was fine. Now we've got a 2003 GMC Sierra 1-ton dually truck with a camper sitting in the bed of the truck that's front to back. I think it's 11 and a half plus it's about 18 or 19 feet long. It has a full queen bed, not an RV queen, a full queen bed up above the cab. It's got a dry bath in it. It's got a dinette with a slide out. It's got microwave. It's got a gas stove. It's got a big refrigerator, standing room, heat, even have a propane generator. So I felt pretty spoiled this year staying in that. It was pretty amazing. I get up in the morning, turn on the heat for a little bit, make my coffee on the stove. If I wanted to use a microwave, I'd turn on the propane generator for a few minutes and crank that up. But yeah, it was really nice to have that. So that was pretty cool. The other thing I did that was pretty fun is I went to a varnishing class by Joni Blanchard, who's in Port Townsend, and she does varnishing for a living on wooden boats, and she's been doing it for 30 years. She's an expert. She's got a book. I sat on her class 2 or 3 years ago, but now I'm coming up where I've got my scamp spars built out of spruce, and I need to put a finish on them. And so I'm going to be starting to do that this winter to get this boat finished. And I've kind of gone back and forth. I want to know, okay, what's a really good way to finish these spars? I want to varnish them. A lot of people put epoxy underneath the varnish, a couple coats, which I had kind of planned to do. And I came to the festival, talked to a couple people, and they said, put West Systems 207, 2 coats under on the mast first, and then do your varnish from there. But then last year, I talked to a gentleman who owns Pacifica, Doug Wilson, and Doug builds masts also and finishes them, and he says you don't need the epoxy, just use varnish, thin your varnish first and work your way up to about 10 coats. Then I took this class from Joni, and that's basically what Joni said. You don't need the epoxy. It doesn't really add anything, and it's a pain to get off if you ever have to strip the mast down and refinish it. I like to keep things simple. This is kind of seems like a Chevy versus Ford debate for a lot of people, but I'm going to go with the simpler method. So I'm going to do a mix of, I'm going to use flagship gloss varnish, which I believe is a Pettit product. And the first coat, I'm going to thin 50% with turpentine and put on. And then I'm going to put about 10 coats of varnish over that. And I'm going to roll it on with a foam brush, tip it off with a, what's the word on bore? Let me think about this one. Okay, I can't think of the term. It's a special brush for varnish. I'm going to tip it off with that. I'm going to let it dry for 48 hours. I'm going to scuff it up with a Scotch-Brite pad. and then I'm going to add my next coat. And I'm going to do that for 10 coats. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about it, actually. So now I've got that kind of figured out. So that's kind of cool because I want to keep the scamp going. Obviously, I want to get it done this winter. So there you go. Now, the other thing I want to mention about the festival that was really awesome is that they have the Edensaw boat building competition every year, where a team of, I think it's between 2 to 4 people, have 2.5 days to build a boat. So I think they can work from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening, Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday they have from 8 to 1 o'clock to build a small boat. And some parts can be pre-built before the competition. But anyway, there's some really cool boats there. And the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building had a team there. And they built a little pram, a sailing pram. I think it's a Michael Kastner design is what it's called. Really cool little boat. That was pretty cool. The other neat thing that happened is a guy built a folding boat. And from what I understand, he is not a boat builder. He builds props for theater. And he built this really amazing little folding boat, about 8 feet long, a little rowboat with 2 thwarts. And he finished it, and he took it out in the harbor, and it rode pretty good, and then he folded it up and carried it away. So that was very intriguing. So that was pretty awesome to see that happen. In prior years, I haven't really followed the building competition that much, but this was pretty cool. There was also a Glen L design dinghy tugboat type of thing that was pretty sweet looking, and the father-son team that built basically a catamaran, which is pretty neat. So anyway, that was pretty fun. I also got to hook up with my friends Kelvin and Cindy Dietz, who are from Eugene, Oregon, and Kelvin's got a 1973 GMC RV that's awesome, and he's got a Datsun 510. He's like Mr. Datsun 510. And he's got a couple pygmy kayaks that he and his wife built, and we got to hook up and talk shop, so that was pretty cool. So shout out to Kelvin. And I think he's going to come back next year because he wants to see if I really got my scamp done or not. So we'll see. So as usual, I had a grand old time. It was awesome. It was exhausting at the same time, but it's fine. I don't mind being exhausted when I'm having that much fun. So I'm still in the line for the ferry. So anyway, that's it. If you haven't been to the festival, you need to go. It's really amazing. I guess what blows me away every time I go is to see the creativity of some of the people there, a lot of the people there, how they're able to do things in such a creative way, and to see all the talent there and the bright people and the people that just have done amazing things over the years is really awesome. So go to the festival next year. It's always the weekend after Labor Day, and you want to make reservations if you're gonna try to stay in town somewhere or camp or anything, because it gets really busy. And if you have any questions, shoot me an email, woodenboatdan@gmail.com, and you can even call me, 425-319-7800. So that's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in, listening to the podcast. I'll have some more fun podcasts coming up here soon. And keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. God bless.